please.
That's more like it.
Get out in the sun. And in the first half, we're going to hear from Nerys Edmonds of Public Health Wales about their work on the health impacts of climate change. And then also there'll be a chance to have a discussion, and they'd like to hear our ideas of what information we need and how to plan and respond for the health impacts. We'll have a short break if necessary, might not need one because that's just going to be 45 minutes in total probably. And then we're going to go to the second half and hear from 3 really good community groups who are both taking action on climate change and also addressing the mental health and anxiety impacts of dealing with these issues. Okay, does that sound good? Make sense? Yeah. So briefly then, we thought we'd like to have a go round to hear who you are, where you're from. So I'll pick you out on my screen for clarity. So let's hear Matt first then.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Matt Swan from the central team at Renew Wales, and yeah, I'm based in Machynlleth. And just a little note, if people could mute themselves whilst the other presentations are happening, that would be great, so we don't get any background noise. Thanks.
Thanks. Well, Nerys, you're going to get to introduce yourself fully, but do you want to say a very quick hello?
Hi, I'm Nerys. I work in the Wales Health Impact Assessment Support Team, so I'll be talking a bit more.
And Michael?
Hi everyone, I'm Michael. I support Nerys in the Wales Health Impact Assessment Support Unit in Public Health Wales.
Lovely, thank you. Mair?
Hiya, Mair dwi. Mair, I'm a coordinator for Renew Wales based in Denbigh, but have been working in Flintshire, Wrexham as well. Yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, and you're also very embedded in the social care world, aren't you? And
yes, that's my background. My background. I joined Renew a few years ago, but yes, I'm really happy to be joining this topic in particular. And yeah, diolch.
Diolch. Okay, Philip, you're on.
Hi, I'm Philip McDonnell. I'm local coordinator for Renew in the Swansea, Neath Talbot area, and with various other hats on, I also work closely from time to time with the local health board and with Public Health Wales.
Great stuff. Joe, would you like to introduce yourself? Oh, here she is.
Hi, I'm Jo. I'm part of the Make New and Mend group under the umbrella of Transition Bro Gwaun, based in Fishguard, Pembrokeshire, and our aim is to reduce textile waste as much as we can with the Make New and Mend anyway. So, but
brilliant.
Yeah.
Right.
And Jo's going to present her work in the second half, which I'm really interested to hear about more. I'm also part of Transition Bro Gwaun, but Jo and I haven't met yet. We've just spoken a few times.
Hi, Jasmine.
Sarah from the British Liver Trust, would you like to say hello?
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah. I am outreach officer for British Liver Trust, obviously working in health and liver awareness, and I'm also volunteer coordinator, 2 hats.
Cool, thank you for coming along. Clive Witchwood.
Borida. Yeah, I'm Clive Witchwood from a new startup, Focus Well Cardigan, Abbottavy. The purpose basically is to be promoting wellbeing economics and donut economics in the Cardigan area. We've got lots of cross links with regard to environmental change, climate change.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, and there's an interesting Facebook page you've started there with bringing all sorts of strands together as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. Right, we've got Derek.
Hello, I have to confess that I was a member of the power industry for about 35 years, pumping out fumes. So I was causing lots of damage, I'm sure. They're all shut. Every power station I ever worked at is shut down now, thank goodness. I was a chartered engineer. I am a chartered engineer. I've also been a secondary teacher. And my contact with Philip, that's the reason I'm here. He's kindly linked me into your organisation, Renew Wales, and I'm also working with the on Eco Church for the Cocket Benefice. Why they can't use easier words, I don't know. And I also volunteer, apart from the two churches I'm involved with, trying to help other people in the Eco Church scheme, which has something to do with the environment, I believe.
Okay. Well, thank you, Derek. And you know what you said about the power companies. At the end of the day, it did put our kettles and our washing machines and heating on as well.
Yep,
so
that's true.
So thank you.
Yeah, my son, incidentally, is in charge of offshore wind power all over the world.
Okay,
for his company. So that's my plus point.
Yeah, that's it. Well, and we need engineers, don't we? That's part of the solution, is to have engineers. So thank you. Now, Lizzie, I see you've put your intro in the chat. Do you want to speak, or shall I say you? If you unmute, otherwise I'll assume I'll say. Okay, well, Lizzie down there, she's out of Tren, on the train. So, but she's from Incredible Edible Porthmadog, Boyd Bendigedig, and they do brilliant things up there, and we're going to hear from them in their team in the second half as well. And she's also Renew Wales coordinator mentor. Thanks, Lizzie. Okie dokie. Well then, let's over to you, Nerys, and see your presentation. Thank you.
Thanks everyone. It's really lovely to meet you and just hear about all the really fantastic work everyone's involved in. It's really heartening, actually. So let me just do the kind of I've got two screens on at home, so I have to make sure I'm sharing the right one. So just let me know if you can see the presentation, please.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
is that all okay? Oh, lovely. Thank you.
Yeah,
It's
that's
always a relief when it actually kind of happens.
Well done.
Okay. So as I said at the beginning, my name's Nerys Edmonds. I work in Public Health Wales in the Wales Health Impact Assessment Support Team, and Michael's here from our team as well this morning. And we've been working actually since 2019 on a health impact assessment, looking at the impacts on health and well-being of climate change in Wales. And I'm going to talk to you a bit about that work today, and then I'm really keen to hear kind of some of your perspectives around health and well-being and climate change, and because this obviously is work that's ongoing for us, you know, and we are also developing further work looking at that's going to build on the health impact assessment around, you know, maybe different tools and information and resources that can help communities and organisations with planning for the health impacts of climate change. So this conversation is going to be really useful for us today, and I hope it's maybe the start of further conversations. So just a little bit, some of you will know Public Health Wales quite well. Philip mentioned doing some work with us previously, but some of you might not be quite so familiar. So we are an NHS trust. We're the National Public Health Agency for Wales, and our role is to protect and improve the health and well-being and reduce health inequalities. Now, I've got this little diagram on this slide, and it's really just to represent, you know, the fact that we've got a very broad range of work that happens in Public Health Wales, and we do have some statutory functions as well. But just to highlight really that you can see there in that kind of little green bubble that we do work around protecting the public from infection and environmental threats to health. And so we have a health protection directorate, and also within that we have an environmental public health team. Now, our health protection directorate has obviously been very visible in the COVID-19 pandemic and really leading that work, and actually sorry, many of us from across the organisation had to put our work on hold in order to support the response to COVID-19, which is partly why this work on climate change has taken a little longer than we would have liked. But it was obviously very important that we all contributed to that response. But also within the Health Protection Directorate is our environmental public health team, and they work constantly on responding to environmental incidents and environmental issues and their impact on health. So, and they also, for example, provide expert public health advice into various planning applications. So, you know, things that could come up, like, I don't know, a new biomass plant, or any kind of licensing for particular industrial processes, they would be inputting into those planning applications with a public health perspective, as well as the director. So I should note as well that there is a director of public health for each of the health board areas, and that person holds the responsibility for promoting the health of people within each of the health board areas. So we have a local public health team that are based within each health board, and then we as Public Health Wales are the sort of national expertise, if you like, providing kind of input at a national level. So our environmental public health team also provide kind of advice and guidance around extreme weather. So they already do that in terms of heat waves, flooding, any kind of extreme weather or events. They provide advice and guidance both for, you know, the public, but also organisations. Other teams in Public Health Wales, just to note, we have a health and sustainability hub that are also in the same division as my team, and they work very much on promoting sustainable development and the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act across the public sector, across all public bodies in Wales, but particularly the NHS, and they're also leading our decarbonisation plan. And Michael, as we go through, Michael's going to post some of the links to some of the teams I'm going to mention in the chat. So if you want to follow up and find out a bit more, you can. We also have a Public Health Network Cymru, which is basically a sort of knowledge sharing hub about public health that's for anybody in Wales who's got an interest in promoting health and wellbeing in communities. So you can join Public Health Network Cymru. They do a whole range of podcasts, webinars. They've actually been doing a lot of work around climate change. So we've had quite a number of webinars recently on climate change. So that, if you're not a member of Public Health Network Cymru, it's quite a good you know, place to join if you want to network more and find out more. And certainly we will be kind of, I guess, promoting a number of our products and events through them. Something else I was going to say on that. Oh yes, we've been doing, so through the work, we've recently kind of carried out sort of 3 major health impact assessments, one on Brexit, one on climate change, and one on COVID-19 and the impacts, the wider impacts of the pandemic. And we're bringing that together now into a theme that we call the triple challenge, really, because actually across those 3 major issues, there's common challenges for health and well-being. So we've got a whole number of reports and streams of work now on what we call the triple challenge for health and well-being in Wales, arising from some of these really kind of disruptive and kind of big challenges for the health and well-being of Wales. Just to flag up, just going back to that diagram before I move on, we've also got teams that work and sort of areas of work that focus on mental well-being and resilience, promoting the health of the next generation, so a big focus on early years, promoting healthy behaviours, so things like tackling obesity and improving physical activity is a big focus. And we also have our kind of big public health screening programmes, so we deliver all the cervical screening, breast screening, AAA screening as well. So I just wanted to give you a flavour really of the breadth of work and also the different teams that are involved in climate change as well in Public Health Wales. Okay, this is our website for the Wales Health Impact Assessment Support Team, and we provide support for organisations across Wales to use health impact assessment, which essentially is a tool to help understand how different policies or events could impact on health and well-being. And we particularly look at the sort of more social factors influencing health, such as housing, employment, the living environment, community, community networks, family relationships. So we're looking at a very broad perspective of health, not just necessarily on specific diseases or on health services delivery. And you can find out a lot more about our work. We do a lot of work around spatial planning and health as well. So I have quite a strong link into that kind of environmental perspective as well. So getting on to our work around the health impact assessment of climate change. Our aim for this work is to look at what the potential and actual health and wellbeing impacts of climate change will be in Wales, and looking at very much as like a physical, mental, social impacts. And we really wanted to, there's a lot of very technical information available about health impacts of climate change, but we really wanted, when we started this work, to kind of get a bit more insight into what does it really mean for people's lives, where they live, where they work, where they play, and how it could affect people. And the other aims for our work on this is really to provide information and evidence to help inform planning for adaptation to climate change and responding to climate change. And it's a national level piece of work, so it's about informing both national organisations, including Welsh Government, and also regional bodies like health boards, local authorities and communities. And it's also about informing our own work programme in Public Health Wales. The overview of the health impact assessment is that we're looking at Wales, and we did a participatory, what we call a participatory health impact assessment, which means that we engage different organisations and stakeholders in the work. We've looked at both negative impacts and potentially some of the opportunities. And as I've said, we're looking very much at the social aspects of health. And we also then look at particular groups in the population and how they could be impacted. So trying to identify, are there particular groups at higher risk of impact and any inequalities? We've used a range of evidence, including a literature review. We did about 25 interviews with experts in Wales. We ran 2 big stakeholder workshops in February 2020, before, and they were face-to-face before the lockdown. And they were really rich sources actually of insights from communities and organisations across Wales. And we've also got a strategic advisory group which Renew Wales have inputted into as well. So our final report isn't finished yet. We've completed all our data collection and analysis. We're still finalising the report, which will come out hopefully in the summer. But we did publish 4 infographics based on our findings around the time of the COP in November, and I'll be sharing those today. But we will let you know about our final report when it's out. So obviously, Earth is our life support system. The ecosystems support, human and all the other life on Earth, and any impact on that, on those ecological systems, weather systems, will impact our health and well-being. So our first infographic that we published was really trying to highlight some of those key messages, really, about how nature supports our physical well-being, our mental well-being, our social well-being, but also obviously provides those what we call essentials for life, clean air, water and food. We are dependent on those planetary systems. And we know that climate change is going to disrupt those systems and change our climate on which those systems depend. We've identified a number of population groups that we've looked at in the health impact assessment. So obviously the whole population is affected by climate change and will be, but we've also highlighted some groups that will be maybe particularly more vulnerable in different ways. So we've highlighted children and young people, people with disabilities and long-term conditions, different occupational groups that because of the nature of their occupation, maybe because they're outdoors more, or because they're more affected by heat, or because the demands on them. So you can see that health and emergency services are there. And that's because of the potential increased demands on those occupations that will arise from climate change. So within the health impact assessment, we're exploring impacts on different groups of people. and in order really to help with planning about how do we need to think about different population groups when we're looking at how do we kind of protect people from the health impacts of climate change. So one of the infographics we produced in November was linked to this, and we highlighted 4 particular population groups: children and young people, older adults, people on low income, and people with disabilities and long-term health conditions. I'm only going to pick up a little bit on this sort of detail this morning because I think, you know, we want to sort of discuss this more than anything. But I guess one of the things to highlight is that these groups will be affected by different aspects of climate change. You know, just to pick up on children and young people, I think there's much more awareness now about the mental well-being impacts around both climate anxiety, but also in the event of things like flooding, the disruption to children's lives, their education, their housing, you know, the stress that they see their parents being under are all very well evidenced in terms of mental health impacts from climate change on children. But also increased heat. You know, children are more vulnerable, particularly younger children, to increased heat. And this can affect, you know, their ability to engage in physical activity, but also their education. So a couple of years ago, the UK Parliament Environmental Committee did they commissioned an inquiry into the effect of heat. And one of the things that came out of that, some of the evidence that they obtained was from teachers about how much heat was affecting children's ability to concentrate and, you know, basically do learning in school. So, you know, one of the other things we've highlighted there is that actually children and young people's kind of advocacy around climate change and their engagement and participation in climate activism can be a positive for them because they're, you know, they're playing an active role in trying to change things. Looking at older adults and people with long-term health conditions and disabilities, again, we've got a range of impacts there, particularly in terms of increased vulnerability in extreme weather, but also, again, heat having an impact, particularly on, I'm aware that Sarah's here from the Liver Trust, which I was really interested in because certain conditions are more at risk and, you know, can affect people when it's hot. You know, their metabolism of medication can change, their vulnerability to dehydration. There was an interesting study we looked at whereby older people were less likely to go out and socialise in heat waves, which could obviously contribute to their isolation. So there's a number of factors arising from that change in weather. Just looking at people on a low income, again, we're very aware, and one of the things we'll be highlighting in the health impact assessment is the sort of equity impacts of climate change, and that people on a low income, you know, maybe in, you know, have less resources to respond to the impacts of climate change. So whether that's not having adequate insurance if their house is damaged, or ability to adapt their housing to different weather, rising food prices, that will be more of a strain for people on a low income. So this is really about trying to refine our thinking and our evidence on how do we need to support different groups as the climate is changing to protect health and well-being. The other area we focused on in the infographics was the impacts of increased heat. And this is generally because there's a less developed policy agenda around this. And the UK independent assessment of climate risk says that heat risks are a top priority for further action in the next 2 years. So we've highlighted different settings that where heat can have an impact. And just to highlight again, you know, this is across schools, it's across workplaces, it's in people's homes, but also we've got some vulnerable people in care homes and residential settings where heat can pose a, you know, real risk to people's health and well-being. And I'd be interested in your perspectives on that in terms of the clients and communities that, you know, you're engaged with. So overall, the health impact assessment identifies that, you know, all the social determinants of health are impacted, which isn't a surprise, but we're breaking that down into quite detailed different areas within the report, you know, across. So some of our other public health programs that look at things like physical activity, you know, physical activity could be affected by climate change, because we already see that extreme weather disrupts a whole range of sporting activity and people's ability to exercise outside, but as does heat. Social and community factors, community resilience and cohesion is actually, you know, a major protective factor for people's health and well-being. And that's one of the reasons why I, you know, I'm so sort of passionate about the work that you're doing with Renew Wales and that people are doing in communities, because actually that is so very important for people's resilience in the future, is that working together to solve problems and to support each other. Access to health and care services. It was really interesting for us, because when we did the workshops in sort of late February 2020, one of the things that was discussed was about disruption in access to health and care, you know, during extreme weather, particularly for rural communities. And obviously, literally a matter of sort of weeks later, we all went into a lockdown and access to health and social care was disrupted hugely. So we've actually had an awful lot of learning from COVID in terms of telemedicine and all sorts of different ways of adapting health and care. But I think that is going to be even more, well, as important within climate change as well. And a whole other load of areas that, you know, the more the environmental side, such as water quality and availability, flooding, landslides, air quality, the impact on people's housing of increased wet weather. So there's a lot of areas that are going to affect people's health and well-being. It's a very complex picture. We've also particularly highlighted food security, and that is both in terms of climate change, but also linked to Brexit, and COVID-19 obviously had some impacts on food supply chains. So that's something that's becoming a bigger focus across that work around the Triple Challenge. And some of the other elements we wanted to highlight just across more sort of themes really was that the way that decisions are made about adapting to climate change can also affect people's health. You know, if people are very worried about flooding in their local area, then actually the way decisions are made about defending communities is important to people's health and well-being as well. And also sort of the sort of perceptions of risk that people have, how people psychologically adapt to climate change is really important. And I think that's something you're going to be talking about a little bit later. Just wanted to highlight the climate change risk assessment, the summary for Wales, which some of you may be very familiar with and some may not be, but it really highlights some of the key areas where more action is needed to protect health and well-being. And across some of the areas that I've already mentioned. I just wanted to also, you know, I am also always very aware of everybody's health and well-being when we're talking about climate change and how it affects all of us. And I think what's also really important is that there are some real benefits to health and well-being from mitigation and decarbonisation strategies. So this was a really great infographic that the British Medical Journal published a few years ago, and it's a really strong demonstration of how action to tackle climate change, such as increasing active travel, providing healthier homes in terms of warm homes, but also better ventilated homes, so action on renewable energy, more sustainable food production, how they have benefits for health and well-being. So the more action that we do on decarbonisation and mitigation, there's also some real benefits, there's some real win-wins for health and well-being as well. So you can download the infographics that I've shown in the presentation. You can download those from the website that I've posted there. I've put a link there to the climate change risk assessment. And I just wanted to flag also that the NHS Wales has a decarbonisation delivery plan. And that's partly about how the NHS is planning to decarbonise across its estate and operations, but also it does contain some elements that are around planning for the health impacts of climate change as well. So that's my kind of a bit of a just overview of the work that we've been doing. I've put up some discussion questions, but I really don't mind what we discuss if you've got any specific questions about the work that I've presented. But some of the areas that I thought might be interesting to discuss is, you know, from your perspective, what health and wellbeing information and evidence do you think communities and community-based services need to respond to climate change? Because that will help inform our work on different products that we develop. Are there any groups that you feel are particularly or will be particularly impacted, their health, you know, their health and wellbeing will be particularly impacted? And, you know, any health and wellbeing issues that you particularly see arising in your work or now or in the future. So, but really happy to take any questions or think about any of those discussion questions. And what I will do is when I end the slideshow now, I'll just put those in the chat as well as a little reference. So thank you. I'm going to end the slideshow and I'm going to stop sharing. And then we can hopefully all see each other again. And yeah, happy to take, I hope I haven't run over there. Yeah, happy to take any questions. I'm just cutting and pasting my little things into the chat there.
Oh, could I ask a general question?
Yes, certainly.
That was a very good presentation with lots and lots of very relevant information. Obviously, we've just seen it in a flash. Are we going to get copies? Can we get copies of your presentation at the end of this thing?
Yeah.
I can, right, because there's lots of information there. I'd like to, you can't copy it down fast enough. Okay,
No.
thank you. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks.
similarly.
Thank you, Derek.
Yeah, Maya asked, could we share the slides? Yeah, because there's a lot of dense information. It's very well presented. It was quite digestible. So
good. I'm glad, because I know there is a lot there, and that's why I generally just try to focus on a few areas because there's a lot to cover.
Yeah.
Well, good slides. Yeah. So will you would they go to the websites, or would we email them around? What would be the way to share that presentation?
Email them around, I think.
Yeah, what I'll do is I'll PDF it because it's got some of the photos. There's a couple of photos in there that are my own, and it's made the file quite big. So I'll I'll PDF it, and then it's easier to email it then.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Ooh.
Any other points? I'm really interested to hear what you're seeing in with the people you work with in relation, or what your thoughts are about the future. So, or any questions, any other questions?
Maya and then Philip. Oh, muted.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to share a little bit of what happened when I first saw these demographics shared round. Was it November time?
Yeah.
I guess I just it was like a little build moment for me personally, because I'm not from the climate science background. And over all the 4 or 5 years I've been with Renew, I have struggled, to be honest, to find climate information to people who are so overwhelmed. Because as Jasmine said, I'm involved in working with carers, families in need, who, just as a little example, I'm trying to bring a group of carers together, which I am going to do, but it's really quite difficult, because for some, it's like, what on earth are you asking me? I'm just about coping with what I've got. So going back to my original point, to have those images and the information in Welsh context to start off with, a clear Welsh context, and to have it in such an understandable way, I really wanted to say how excited I was to when those came round, and that's why I've asked for the slides as well, because I think it's a lead in to asking those people like carers, because unless we hear their voices, because particularly unpaid family carers, they are isolated. They are completely isolated. So they've got an even more. There's a bigger challenge in being part of community resilience projects. You know, I've seen the positive examples of community groups that I've been working with, and I come away inspired every time. But there is a concern about the hidden people who are not, and the whole sustainable the whole sustainability of communities is often based on family carers who are providing all that care, and it's all hidden. I mean, this is no news to my colleagues from Renew Wales, but I do tend to bang on about it. So I just wanted to thank you for that, basically. And
well,
that
thank
I will be using it. I'll certainly be using it to, you know, in my session with the carers next month now.
Thank you. That's really, I mean, it's lovely feedback for me, because I kind of led the development of those infographics. So it's really, you know, and that's what I really wanted to try and achieve was, yeah, a clearer communication about what does it really mean for people. And I absolutely agree with you. There's people who are already vulnerable and isolated, that actually climate change could exacerbate that. And it's really important that we're thinking about those groups of people when we're looking at how do we respond. So that's fantastic. And it's, you know, great work, and it's good to be having those conversations.
Yeah, I'd echo that. And also by, you know, given that you say the people, that the hidden people like carers, if you're the advocate, you know, that's what we need, isn't it, for the people that haven't, whose voices aren't heard, to advocate.
It's quite interesting, Jasmine, because it's still, well, what's the relevance, you know, and it's quite hard to find a way of making those links when people are so stressed. I mean, the future generations information is really helpful, you know, so yeah, no, and that's why I really wanted to be here today, and I'll be sharing this with as many people in my field as possible, because I don't see the lead. I don't see the lead happening anywhere else. I can't see anybody else taking the lead on this, you know, in terms of how much communities depend on unpaid family carers, I mean, and we can learn from them about resilience and, you know, anyway, I'll shut up on that one. Thank you.
Thank you. Philip, you had your hand up.
Yeah, just echo those thanks to Nerys, and to just say, I guess in a similar way to Maya, that when I came across that infographic, that had a straight away such a powerful impact. I haven't yet used it with others, but straight away it was, hang on now, that is going to open up certain doors for certain communications with certain people that I've really struggled with in the past. All my sort of 25, 30 years working within the environment sector has actually been more about trying to break down silos and draw the links between the environment, the economy, health, and so on. Try to highlight that and just try to encourage, you know, professionals or volunteers or whatever within that have particular interests or vocations to recognise those kind of links. And I think it's quite wonderful to see Public Health Wales really taking on board this agenda and running with it. It's what, 10, 12 years ago that the Marmot report came out, and that within professional circles had a major impact at the time, because it drew very clear links, although we knew it already. It emphasised the links between the economy and health. You know, what people's income is and their health, and it did it in such a stark way, and it made a lot of people sit up. It's sad to say there hasn't been a lot of actual change as a result of that, but at least it made people sit up and think about it. So I think you're doing a similar thing by really taking the lead from the health sector, but actually on climate change and environmental issues. And again, it's something that we've known about, those links between health and the environment. But it's one thing environmentalists chanting about that. It's a totally different thing if the health sector starts shouting about the importance of the economy or the importance of the climate on people's health and well-being. So it just gives a whole different weight to those arguments, really. What I just hope that before it's too late, that that push from Public Health Wales actually does have the necessary impact, because what I don't see still is that necessarily filtering through to the necessary extent into health boards. I mean, there's some great stuff going on within the health board in Swansea Bay. I work with colleagues within that health board, and yeah, some great projects going on, but it's kind of like still just tinkering around the edges of what really needs to be done. And then also it feeding down to everyday practitioners, whether it be GPs or whether it be health visitors or whether it be volunteers in the carers sector, as Maya refers to, and so on. It's not yet, I think, filtering down there within the professional sort of setting. Obviously, individuals, there's a lot of individuals who have their personal views about climate change and things like that, and are passionate about it and trying to do their thing. But it's not...
I would say actually, Phil, just because you've reminded me of something there, if you don't mind me just jumping in, is that
go on, I've said too much, go on.
No, it's fine. No, it's been great. I've really appreciated what you've said, and it's very helpful for me, to be honest, to hear some of these points, because this is what we're trying to do, is to advocate. And so a couple of things in response really is, one is that I think there's a real growing movement within the health care professions around sustainability. So something that just reminded me that I forgot to mention is that our primary care division has been working on a greener primary care agenda, and they've got a whole toolkit now, and they're working with GPs and clusters across Wales on that. We've also got a whole range of, there's a whole network now called, I think it's called Green Health Wales, and that is bringing together networks of health professionals across Wales. We've got some fantastic so we've got, I know in Betsy as an example, they've got an amazing greener health group in Betsy. I can't remember what it's called now, but they're doing a lot of work about decarbonising healthcare. So I think we've actually got a real, both in terms of people's own passionate interest themselves, but also in their actual job roles, because the decarbonisation agenda is really gathering pace in the NHS. So I think there's a lot to be really hopeful about there. The other thing I would just to respond to say is that when you look at a lot of the surveys of the public around their views around climate change and what they see as priorities, nearly every survey I've looked at around this says that one of the biggest concerns of the public is vulnerable people, access to health and social care and emergency services, and generally health and well-being. So it's actually a topic that really cuts through with the public, I think, as well as decision makers in some respects. So I think, I think it's interesting what you've said, because that really reflects some of what I've been seeing in my work as well. And I think it presents an opportunity really. And I think partly it's because I think in adaptation planning, there's been a lot of focus on infrastructure, and what is really being highlighted is that there hasn't been enough attention paid to the health and well-being aspects of climate change. So, but no, thank you. I really appreciate your reflections, because I know that you've worked long and passionately on this agenda, Phil. So thank you.
Thank you. We've got some new people joining now, ready to present for the second half, which we'll go over to in a minute. I don't want to cut this discussion short, but I'll just check with anyone else. So Nerys's questions were partly, is there particularly evidence that communities or services might need to be able to respond? Particularly affected groups, I think we've covered that quite well with the vulnerable groups. And are there other health and wellbeing issues that people see arising or anticipate in the future around climate change? So don't know, before we cut you off into the second half, has anyone else would like to say
just
anything?
Posting a link into the chat there because somebody's asked about Green Health Wales. So I'm just, if you go to that website, you can find out about the Betsy Cadwallader Green Health Group and the primary care work. It's all in that Green Health Wales website. Sorry, anybody else? Yes.
Yeah, can I just ask quickly, you mentioned earlier about there's a group of Public Health Wales working within the Public Services boards, regional boards. Is that, did I get that right? So how do we link, how do we find out how, because that information, we've discussed this in Renew Wales, the information doesn't seem to be coming down, that, you know, there's not enough exchange of information possibly. So how can we link to that as interested people?
I mean, the Public Health Network Cymru that you said anyone could join. Are you thinking about that?
Yeah, but I'm part of that, but I'm thinking specifically about the Partnership Services Board across North Wales and linking, you know, don't worry if there's not an easy answer, because that's a whole big topic in itself, isn't it?
It is. I think in a way, I suppose the local public health teams will be engaging with things like the public services boards on their wellbeing objectives and on that. And quite often there is an environment objective, or so I think that sort of multi-agency structure of the public services board is probably one of the key ways to engage. There isn't a simple answer because I think the picture's quite different in different parts of Wales. And there's different, I know, for example, you know, some of my colleagues in local teams are very involved in some climate change, you know, projects and programs in their local areas, but I don't have the full picture across the whole of Wales for each of the teams. But I think that's something for us to sort of be thinking of. Oh, I can see that Phil's posted something there. Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thoughts from anyone who hasn't spoken yet? Well, and if so with your questions then, so it sounds like you're going to be doing ongoing further work, Nerys, and probably like participatory things where people can get involved.
Definitely, yeah. And we'll be doing like a launch event for the health impact assessment. The other thing to say is that building on the health impact assessment, we're going to start developing we're loosely calling it a health adaptation toolkit, but I haven't got, it's not a format in there yet, but that will bring together a range of resources and tools to help people think about addressing health and wellbeing of climate change. So that's something we're really keen to engage people with. We're going to be, Michael and I are working on a survey to find out what knowledge and information people need or what tools. So I'd really love this to be an ongoing conversation with Renew Wales and your network. So and it's been really helpful for me today, and I hope you found it useful as well.
Okay, brilliant. Fiona has no sound. Okay, well look, I will call it there because we said, is that okay, do you think, everybody?
That's fine, thank you.
Does it feel like it's running?
Sorry, I can't stay for the next bit.
Yeah, Philip's got his hand up.
Sorry, Jasmine, just to highlight two things very, very quickly. One bit of work, I don't think Nerys mentioned this, but Public Health Wales have been leading on an initiative called Healthy Travel Charters, and I'm working with them in this area, Swansea area, on that, and that is leading, particularly within the public sector, commitments to promoting sustainable and active travel within organisations. So that is a really, really positive thing. And also, in case anybody is interested, I've organised a webinar next Wednesday morning, which is focused specifically on the health board in Swansea Bay. And even if you don't live in this area, you may actually find it interesting to see what a health board is actually doing in terms of decarbonisation internally, as it were, but also links to communities and how they're working with communities and community groups and things like that on sort of environmental and sustainability projects. You're very welcome to come if anybody who's interested.
Thank you.
Great,
Brilliant.
thank you, Phil.
Okay.
Great.
All right. I'm going to officially close this first half then, if that's okay. And look forward to contributing in the future and hearing more stuff.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Jasmine, and everybody.
Yeah, and Michael for being
Thank you.
the link wizard. So we're going to now look a bit more specifically at the anxiety that's arising around the environmental issues. But Fiona, who's one of the speakers, has not got sound. So I put some information up in the chat, but perhaps, Matt, I could leave that in your hands. Well, in case there was people here who didn't know about these issues, I'm actually going to do a short presentation for just a few minutes before we hear from the 3 community groups who are taking action on climate change and anxiety as well. So Matt, if you got my presentation there, which I'm going to make much shorter. It's a bit silly now because we've got the people that know everything here, but I'll still say my piece because Delith, who's left Renew recently, she asked me to do this bit. Okay, so our focus on this second half, which will also be about 45 minutes or so, but we're welcome to stay longer if people want to talk about it longer, is how can we restore calm and thrive in a time of eco-anxiety? So since the declaration of the climate emergency a couple of years ago, nature emergency last year by the governments, obviously overwhelm and anxiety, especially in young people, has increased dramatically. Next slide, please. So there's as one of the things I'd like to point out is there's this notion that you can turn a problem into solutions, and a climate emergency being declared is also, we can frame it as a climate of emergence, because now there's millions of people that previously did not really have consciousness of these issues becoming aware. And one approach is that, well, I don't know if any of you've read the book by Paul Hawken, Blessed Unrest, but he documents that there's billions of people in some way now working towards social and ecological solutions, which are very tied in with climate change. So I just picked there a little picture of these very big landscape style solutions, which I find quite inspiring if I'm feeling down about it, where across all continents, within 2 or 3 years, that's the picture in China, where they're reversing the climatic issues and making very robust, resilient landscape scale solutions. Next slide, please. So I'm mentioning, as you all know who are here, whether it's climate anxiety or general anxiety and depression, it's very well documented that small actions and doing anything, doing something, alleviates despair and can change the way you feel. And I was just going to flag up, well, there's the idea that even if you don't have a garden, you can grow some salad on the windowsill. Small things like repairing, which we're going to hear from the brilliant Make, Do and Mend project in a minute. And I'll just point out this resource here called 52climateactions.org, because that's been a very well-researched piece of work by the Permaculture Association. And it's very good infographics. You can download free cards from them and so forth. And it's really is specifically actions that any individual can take to try and reduce this sense of overwhelm. Next slide, please. Oh, lost him. Okay, I have to mention nature is my favorite thing. As you, again, you would all, everyone that's here will probably be aware that going outside in nature does restore calm and well-being. And there's some very interesting research now and strong evidence, and particularly around things like the shapes that we see in nature, sensory stimulation of scents and sounds and the colours. And even one of my colleagues, she's a psychologist for the health board down here, she has recently shown me some research that's showing that soil microorganisms and sunlight, how much they promote serotonin and regulate the nervous system. So that's another interesting strategy. Next slide, please. I feel quite strongly about that we can declutter sources of distress. Since the climate emergency has been declared, the media have stepped up coverage, obviously, and often that is alarming and disempowering imagery that offers no hope. Whereas actually you can still remain informed, but by focusing on solutions. And a good place to start for finding very active, meaningful solutions is something like agroforestry. And here you've got a picture of, that's the Organic Research Centre, the training conventional farmers in techniques that both address very directly the nature crisis and the climate crisis. And for some people, even looking into solutions to do with climate change is not an option if they're in a very anxious state. So maybe stating the obvious, but if you are in that state or you know someone that feels that much overwhelm, just focusing on anything that nourishes at all, whether that is a cat or someone in your family or a smile. As you know, I had a lot of depression in my 20s and over these issues, and these small things make an immense difference to how we feel and our ability to function and then act as well. Next slide, please. So we're going to hear in any second from the community groups, and it's very, very well evidenced that to be with other people makes a massive difference to depression and anxiety. So to be in groups that are involved in community action for these issues is a double win. And in every village, every town across the country, there is a group of decent people doing something worthwhile. And there you've got the classic community garden, the repair cafe, beach cleans and tree planting. Last slide, please. So I'll just mention the 5 ways to well-being. This is research done by the New Economics Foundation a few years ago, been adopted by Public Health Wales, the NHS, mental health organisations, the whole caboodle. And they identified 5 main factors which do correlate with what our environmental groups are doing. So they're pretty obvious, but they're worth saying. Connect is about being with other people, even if that's a smile with a stranger or whether seeing friends. Be active, get outside, physical and mental well-being impacts. Take notice is about doing mindful activity like mending or journaling or walking. Keep learning new skills, increases confidence, self-esteem, and of course usually gets you to meet new people as well. And the final one is give, which is doing something for others has been shown to reduce anxiety. And in our context, giving to our local community or back to nature in some way also mitigates these sustainability problems. So I have seen people adding other pathways to well-being as well, like good food and good sleep, but they're ones for today. So that's all from me. So, well, apart from Ian, you'll look thoroughly bored by that. So anyway, so
Not
now
at
on
all.
no, okay. I can share those slides. I could, Matt, if he's going to email out the participants these Nerys' slides, then he can stick mine on too as a PDF. Thank you.
Yeah.
So the juicy bit. So first of all, then, these 3 community groups, they're all registered in the Renew Wales programme, and they're all doing excellent things. So we're first going to hear from Bendigedig Boyd Porthmadog, Incredible Edible Porthmadog. And I think that's handing over to Fiona and Teresa, who I haven't met yet. And so we've got a little talk from them and a YouTube video, and then we'll we'll go on to the next group. So, and we'll have a chance to question and answers and discussion, but we're going to hear the 3 presentations first. Over to you, Incredibles.
Okay, hello, I'm Teresa, and I agree with everything you were saying there, Jasmine, because it's so important, the community, the environment, and being connected. So I'm from Incredible Edible Porthmadog. I joined in 2019. I'm originally from a gardening family in Australia. Where, as I was growing up, there were other families in the community there growing fruit, flowers and vegetables, and we all swapped and shared. Some of my happiest memories were of foraging as a child, looking for wild vegetables with aunts and cousins. And to me, food should be swapped, shared, grown and eaten together. I think that's so important. In fact, whenever you go on holiday, some of your happiest memories of when you've been eating and the sorts of foods that you've been eating as well. So food to me is really important. So volunteering at Incredible Edible Porthmadog means friendship, sharing, learning, and the ability to be doing something constructive as far as climate change and food security. I'm not a knowledgeable or even a very green-fingered gardener, but I'm willing to learn and keen to do. In fact, I'm a retired teacher, so all this physical work was quite hard for me at first. We're also in the fortunate position, because of our project manager, Lizzie Wynne, to be building something unique at the Glasslands site, the hub and a wallopini using waste material. If you don't know what a wallopini is, it's in some ways like a bit of a fancy name for a greenhouse, but it is quite lovely. The hub has been built using eco bricks made by many in the community, as well as using cob. It has been a fantastic learning experience for me and a privilege to take part in something unique and beneficial. During the lockdown, I think I would have gone a bit stir crazy if I had been indoors all the time, as the government was asking most people to stay inside and not really go out much unless you really had to. Luckily, because I was working or volunteering at Incredible Edible, we saw ourselves as critical workers because we were producing food for the community. So it gave me the opportunity to go out practically every day. We still kept our distance. There were less people on the site at any one time, but it was brilliant. And I was out there all the time. I know of other people who came and helped us on odd occasions who don't actually help us now and never helped us before, but just came because they were in small terraced houses without not being able to see anybody else, and they just felt that they had to get out, and it was their way of coming out and doing something with somebody else and feeling that they were doing something useful. So I think things like Incredible Edible and other community groups do have a very important part to play in helping people with their mental well-being. There are over 151 Incredible Edible groups around the country, so there's the opportunity for people to join a group, and if there isn't one in your area, there are lots of other community groups that you can help. And I think, you know, like I say, it's so important to be outside in the fresh air, growing food, sharing it, swapping tips. It's just brilliant. Right, I think you're going to show the film now, and then Fiona's going to speak after. One thing I want to say is that in the film that's going to be shown, it's only short, but a lot of things have moved on since then, but you'll get the feeling of what we're up to. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah, interesting that some people came in the lockdown and then didn't come back, and they just used it to tide them over. Yeah, well, for all we know, they might have gone on to do all sorts of things. So
I know. One was a carer actually, and she so it was interesting, but she had to stop for a while, and then once she started up, she
I'll share this video now.
Thank you. Technical one.
I'll let Fiona speak, but as I say, the area has expanded. We have a very long corridor now.
Hi everyone, my name's Fiona. I'm part of the Incredible Edible project. I joined some years ago and have dipped in and out depending what's going on in my life, but I'm a committed member of the group. As you can see from our little video, we've got quite a lot of people involved in our project now, and recently we've joined up with the school next door. So the children are learning how to grow food, how to compost, enjoying being outside, helping us with landscaping their garden, doing weekly gardening classes and understanding the growing cycle. And it's very exciting to watch them make their own discoveries about the connection of waste food on their plate that goes in the bin, being composted and then going back to the flowers and the plants to help them grow to complete a cycle. We've really made a very ugly, dreary site into something beautiful, creating a pollinator garden. So we're not polluting, we're pollinating. We've added trees, native trees. We've got a beautiful little building that looks very curious next to the ugly leisure centre. And we've turned that site into something really creative and lovely for people to come and visit. The building is made out of eco bricks. We, well, our project leader secured a grant from the Wales volunteer, sorry, I can't remember, the Wales Council for Voluntary Action, and our aim was to help people use recycled products. So the making of the eco bricks for the building was a great way of helping to relieve people's eco anxiety, because all that awful plastic waste that people have, they were then able to do something with it. And those small actions really help to make people feel empowered in a big world where we really sometimes feel so small that we can't make any changes to our environment. So our project has helped a lot of people in a lot of small ways, even people who perhaps don't join in on a regular basis. For me, being part of the project helped me to transition to moving to a new area where I didn't really know anybody. So I feel like I've got that community support, and all those things help to relieve feelings of loneliness and isolation. I come from a health background, so I'm really aware of the importance of being with other people, being physical. If you can get down into the soil and start digging, just that small action of planting and gardening, being with other people, helps to change your physical energy, which changes your mind. So all these things add up to healthy mental well-being. Just sitting with friends, people who become friends, having a cup of tea, chatting about things, but actually doing something really important at the same time. So yeah, and we've made a lovely garden for everyone to enjoy, and food for our community.
Brilliant. I think appreciation in the chat. People are smiling apart from the black rectangles, and yeah, it's clearly growing and looks like it's doing wonders, like you say, like a dreary site and accessible to everybody as well by the looks. So hopefully we'll have some questions and thoughts about that, but we will move on to Ian now, if that's okay, not rushing people. Ian's project, Welcome to Our Woods, fascinating world down there too, at the other end of the country to Porthmadog. Are you going to share your screen yourself, or would you like Matt to do your slides?
If I can share, I can try and share here. Let me see. It's disabled at the moment. Can I can Matt?
Made you a co-host, so hopefully now you can share your screen.
Yes, there we go. There we are.
Thanks, everybody.
Can everybody see that?
Yeah.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you, Jasmine. Thank you, Matt, for allowing us to come and Renew Wales, to come and talk about the work we're doing in Treherbert. And good morning, everybody. Hello. So kind of I've titled this kind of community action, climate action, and kind of I think the argument I'm going to make today is that these are the same things, you know, that in Treherbert and in Welcome to Our Woods, in my experience, these have become the same things. And like for similar reasons, that was such a lovely, relaxing video. I think if we just played that video to people, your eco anxiety was lifted. I almost drifted off there. So I had to keep myself awake, pinch myself to keep myself awake. So it was a lovely video. And I think, on a serious note, some of the most difficult conversations we've had or I've had personally with community members over the last few years has been with community members that have had their houses flooded. In 2020, we had some really nasty floods come through, Storm Dennis, and then a couple of other floods came through in 2020. And some people's houses were flooded 3 times that year. And talking to these people about their feelings of when the rain starts again and we get heavy rain, and some of the anxiety that these people have been facing, worried that they're going to be flooded out of their homes again. It has been some really, really difficult conversations, and eco anxiety has come down to a very practical level in Treherbert, in our experience here. So I'm going to be arguing a bit about that. These are the same things. I really liked your decluttering of the conversation and decluttering that comment, and I think that rings bells with me about what Welcome to Our Woods are trying to do, and some of the types of language that we use while we're trying to do that. So we quite often don't talk about climate change. It's the scale of the problem is difficult for local people to take on in its entirety. And I think going back to people being flooded out, people feel that they've got a lack of control in all of this. And I think decluttering and actually having basing it on values and what local people want to see happening on a very local level is very helpful when it comes to how people feel about the future and the hope that we've got for the future and that. And I think some of the important words that that we use is about doing things. We mentioned doing things differently and connecting people to the place where they live. And later I'll come on to talk about the word Cynefin, and I've discussed it in previous sort of meetings with Renew Wales about that sense of place, and the Welsh word Cynefin about the extended the extension of what that word means, and it's about influencing our personal situations and our history, and I'll come on to a little bit. And I kind of think the whole presentation is really about Cynefin. It's about our sense of place and our sense of connection to each other, and food and everything is really important to all of that. And I suppose these are the issues that we wrote this back in sort of 10 years ago. This mission statement was written, and food, water, energy, waste, transport, celebrating our human need for leisure and recreation and culture. All of those things have an impact on the climate, but we're not discussing the climate. We're talking about energy, transport, waste. These are local issues that we can have an effect on. So we're not working from a deficit, and I think the whole thing is that we're not working from a deficit in Welcome to Our Woods, and this is why, because as with many other communities across the country and across the South Wales valleys, this is what we have surrounding our town: a huge carbon sink, a huge abundance of natural resources that that at the moment is not being deployed to support the community. And to combat climate change, we think it's the communities that need to take control of this and taking back control. And I talked earlier about people feeling like a lack of control. And, I think the small projects that we're discussing, like, Incredible Ed and Porthmadog, these are small projects that all add up to this tapestry of us taking action and moving us forward and making us feel a bit more positive about where we're going. So this is the Rhondda Valley, surrounded by natural resources, and on a very different scale to Welcome to Our Woods, surrounding our village is 76 wind turbines, many turbines going up around Wales. And on a very different scale to what we do, this provides 15% of the electricity for the homes in Wales. So, I'm trying, I'm hopefully going to give a bit of a view that there's a lot of hope here. And if we get involved with projects on a local level, we can do something about climate change. I want to talk about other projects that are going on in Treherbert and talk about the fact that these people are celebrating what's going on, and all of this adds up to combating climate change, even when we don't quite realise it does. So we've got the Grow Rhondda that's all about growing plants and food in allotments and in people's gardens. We've got the Repair Cafe Wales, which is similar to the Make, Do, Amend idea that, and we've just started this in Wales, and we've got a Repair Cafe Rhondda. The Lost Peatlands project is a project that's working up above us, restoring peatlands, but they're coming from it from supporting community members to learn new skills, going on walks and transferring knowledge, bringing experts into our community to discuss peat restoration and subjects like that. So it's all very positive, and they're not working on, none of these projects work on a deficit. They're working on these assets and positive nature of where we live. The Rhondda Tunnel is all about active travel and about green tourism. And then we've got one of our project, Crop Cycle, that I'll talk a little bit about in a minute. And that's all about food growing on our high street. And that's a great story about moving from fossil fuels to a more positive future. This is how people generally, back to Welcome to Our Woods, this is how people generally get involved with Welcome to Our Woods. This is what probably the public see a lot of what we do. And it's a social prescribing weekly calendar, and people get involved in social strollers. We've got numerous walking groups at different types of levels. Some people walk in the evening and in the day, making it accessible for people to come and get involved. But also we run a woodland therapy session, and I do encourage you to go and look on our and you alluded to how beneficial time in nature is, and it never ceases to astound me the effects that just taking people into the woods for a cup of tea can actually have huge effects on individuals. And some of the greatest distance that we've traveled with people has been just them going into the woods, making some soup, doing a bit of tree ID, having a cup of tea and having a social event in the woods. And everything that's on this calendar is really a social event. It's where people can come together and meet each other and start creating those connections that allow other things to kind of happen. Those other things are things like managing woodlands for carbon capture, but also to make wood material available in the locality for wood products. So these are two woodlands that we've had a traditional relationship with, managed them in slightly different ways, but Cwm and Penpeak are two woodlands that we've historically had quite a lot to do with locally here. And you can see one of the guys, they're cutting a tree down to stump in a broadleaf bit of woodland, and then just a few months later, that tree bursting back into life, capturing carbon. And of course, while we were doing that, we were training people up, giving people new skills, getting people involved in community work in where they live, and also having this impact in tidying up the woodland, making it a more attractive place for more people to come and use for recreation. So, the hope is that some of this material over time, our aspiration is to start locking that timber up into products in our community here. And and we've started doing that. We've got a spoon club and some other things starting to make products, but we hope to one day to be building houses and really locking up a lot of the carbon that's growing on our hillside into our community and having an influence on the architecture and in the town where we actually live. Other things people get involved in, we've built a small hydroelectric plant in one of our woodlands, and people get involved in that. And along with the big project that's going on around us with the 72 turbines or 76 turbines, we've got this very small hydroelectric plant. And I think this gives people an understanding of the type of mix and what the future actually looks like. We've got these mixes of energy sources, and some of them are very local, like this one sits inside in one of our woodlands, and we commissioned this in 2018. And it was brilliant. It took us 9 years to get this built, lots of support from Renew Wales. And eventually it took us 9 years, but it took 3 months to build. So once we'd got all of the paperwork done, 9 years, things hopefully getting a bit easier. we come back to food again? Food is so important at bringing people together, and this is so it's about, Welcome to Our Woods is really about people and culture, and food has become, I don't think it was part of the plan, but it's become a big part of our work. It's bringing people together to celebrate involves food, involves coming to, exactly as people said, some of the best memories and the best times that we've had is when you're sitting down eating with friends and things like that. So that, we've got Page Your Field Cafe, we've got community gardens going on, and we've got this project Crop Cycle that I'm going to talk about. I think it's the next slide. Yeah, this is a great example of moving from fossil fuels into this new future. So in 1996, the local petrol station closed down, and sort of by about 2017, this was a derelict site causing all kinds of problems, rubbish building up there, and the community were constantly sort of saying, can we do something about this place on our high street? And so Welcome to Our Woods, we weren't sure what we were going to do with it. It was owned by a local housing association. So we took a lease on it, and we said we would develop something of a community benefit over the next few years. And through consultation, community came in and said they wanted learning spaces, they wanted things to grow food, and food became quite a feature of what community wanted on this site. So we, with the support of Welsh Government, we filled in some forms, and we got some money to do some stuff on there over the last couple of years. And we built a food hub, like a food hub called Crop Cycle. And it's this is an artist's impression, but this is what it kind of looks like today. Apart from the trees, they've got a few years to grow to look like that. But so the old fueling station today now is a controlled agricultural environment shipping container. So we're growing hydroponically in one of those shipping containers. The other, what is a shipping container, but we've clad it in timber, is a small classroom and toilet space where we've got a little aquaponics set up where fish are living and feeding the plants. And it's very much a demonstration site. I don't think this is ever going to be a commercial site, but it's a way of getting people involved we're calling this controlled agricultural environments, the growing indoors. That is going to be part of the mix of the future, and getting local people involved in that. And we don't want to have to import it from Kent. We can grow these things here, but we can also create the energy here from things like hydroelectrics. And it's about decluttering and connecting all of these things up in that way. Again, it's about people and culture. We bought the old library building in 2018, and bringing people together for food, for celebrations, and creating those connections is vital in actually being able to deliver these types of programs locally, these types of projects locally. So this building has been brilliant for us. We were stuck up on the mountain, and I think people didn't know, lots of local people didn't know what we were doing, and bringing our work and a space onto the high street has been a revolution. It's kind of changed what Welcome to Our Woods, who we can talk to now. So having these hubs, having spaces that people can come together, have discussions, form the relationships, and then work together to deliver is vital in this type of work. So all of these kind of little projects, how do we scale this up a little bit more to be to have an impact on the global climate situation? How does this work become more relevant to the region and to Wales and to the country and to the globe? And we got involved in 2019 in the Skyline project. It was 3 communities getting involved in it. There was us in Treherbert, Aberystwyth and Caerau. And we've all been really exploring what would happen if the community got control or took stewardship of the whole landscape that surrounds their town. What would they do with it? What could the outcomes be around that? One of the most recent outcomes, and there's a website, futureforestvision.co.uk, lots and lots of videos on there about the process to date. But one process that's gone really well and has actually helped bring people together and share what they would like to see sort of happen next has been this co-design process. So we've worked with Natural Resources Wales, Forestry Commission in Wales, and we've been doing a co-design process of 50 community members, a bit like a citizens assembly, and we took a lot of notes from citizens assembly and saw how they were working and what was working well there, and we tried to recreate something locally that local people could get involved in. And so for 8 weeks, 50 community members met with NRW, and we brought in experts to talk to these people and transfer knowledge to these people. And this has developed what we're now calling the Future Forest Vision. And I think what's really interesting about it is that the community can balance the books. The community can balance the books on economics, the environment, community benefit. And when it turns out that without the community's assistance, people like NRW are not going to be able to do the job in the future, because these are very specific to place, what people want to see. And what we feel it really comes down to is values, and we can work together. And it turns out that Natural Resources Wales and the community actually share exactly the same values. It's just about what that looks like on the ground in the future. So this is kind of where we've kind of got to today, really, about, and I kind of encourage you to kind of have a look at the Future Forest Vision website. There, it shows the process going on there. And I think, the people that got involved in it, lots of people probably weren't involved in the environment, but had concerns about global issues and some of the issues. And I suppose some of the other things that have become very relevant today with COVID, with the food supply chains, all of these things are very important to the community now, and we're talking about them in the community. But all of these things are actually having an impact globally as well. So taking control back is. So we come on to this kind of word, Cynefin, and I kind of think this is what we're trying to do in Treherbert, really, is just connect people to their place, and all of these little narratives, all of these little actions, whether you're involved in them or not, add up to our personal situation and make us and our understanding of our place in the world. And I think getting involved, same as the sort of the last project mentioned there, getting involved in these projects can really help with your own mental health, with your physical health, and and particularly when it comes down to dealing with some of these huge issues, breaking them down, decluttering them into something like a repair cafe, like a amend, these are how Work Towards believes that we're going to be able to help people get involved in this. I'll leave it there, Jasmine. It's packed in a lot. I'm sorry if I've rattled on about a lot of different things and whether I was very concise or not, but that's kind of my point of view on it. Thank you, Jasmine.
Wow, brilliant. I mean, I think you have packed in a lot, and I think it's well worth it. Like with the other two projects, I mean, this is the wealth of richness we've got, isn't it? And this is why we can actually feel like we can face the challenges that we're beset with, because these things are happening all over the place. But these are particularly good examples we've got here today. Yesterday I did look at the Future Forest Vision website. I'm a very fast reader, so I managed to read it all in about 20 minutes. But what an example of a co-design process where people from all walks of life are actually planning with NRW, who are, can be quite inaccessible to manage and have those huge resources around them, be looked after in a way that reflects the values and needs of the actual people there. So if you've got the energy for internet research, go and have a look. It's a beautiful short film, isn't there? It's a straight film that's quite easy, accessible if you don't want to read it all. So nice comments. We're all still together. If we can hold it all in our minds, we can have a chance to chat in a minute. Joe from Transition Gwaun, are you ready to do your bit?
Yeah, I'm ready. So I think Matt's going to share his screen.
I'll share the screen.
Hi, Matt.
Hello.
Yeah, and that Maya's just put up in the chat about Cynefin. It's an interesting word indeed. So, okay, so here's Joe from down here in Fishguard. It's one of the transition projects, and Make New Amend, and enjoy.
Right, welcome. So I'm Jo Moss, and I'm part of the Make New Amend, which is under the umbrella of Transition Gwaun, who are based in Fishguard in Pembrokeshire. They've already got the wind turbine the projects have included a wind turbine, which is now paying for itself and paying out for local groups within 10 miles of the area to do community projects to help with climate change. And also we had Transition Gwaun had a transition cafe, which reused supermarket past the sell by date food and was very successful. So this Make New and Mend is a group, and we meet on a regular basis. It's only just sort of started in the last 12 months, and we meet regularly, and we try and encourage people to come and participate in renewing, using textiles to prevent waste. So next slide, please. So did you know that 80% of landfill is textile waste? And each year in the UK alone, this equates to 350,000 tonnes, or about the weight of 70,000 African elephants. That was our that was from Clothes Aid, and it takes about 2,600 gallons of water to make a single pair of blue jeans. And this includes the cotton growing and manufacturing, but not the laundering once purchased. So that's from Easy Eco Tips. So our aim is not to sort of get on a soapbox and, you know, deliver sort of speeches, but to try and sort of encourage you to come and participate. We create quite a friendly atmosphere. We try and create awareness of the fast fashion industry and clothing waste while promoting an enjoyable social environment. So next slide, please. So so we meet in Paul Sartori Furnishings in Letterston locally, and Paul Sartori charity. So we try and have use and reduce the textile waste by having access to the clothes which might go otherwise to landfill. So we've made bags and sun hats and cut up old t-shirts into strips which can be woven or crocheted into other into rugs or whatever. And a new lady's just joined us who's upcycling donations into beautifully coloured coordinated children's clothes. So and they will be sold by Paul Sartori. But it's really the sort of getting together and having a chat and you know, the community spirit that is the most important, really. Next slide, please. So we also have a regular repair cafe where we repair garments in Goodwick, which is very popular. And there's a wonderful view as well because we're overlooking the Fishguard Harbour there. So we invite people to come along and bring their garments that would otherwise probably be chucked away, and teach them skills on how to repair. And also we don't charge, but we do take donations. And yeah, it's a lovely friendly atmosphere and with a nice view. Right, next slide, please. So here we go. So we've got a couple of machines, and we also do some hand repairs as well. And I found through lockdown, I was doing quite a bit of research for a wellbeing project I was doing, and that actually the hand stitching is very meditative, and you have to sort of concentrate. You have to sort of shut out your anxiety because you're just concentrating on what you're doing at the time, and the process is quite therapeutic. So next slide, please, Matt. So there we go, there's a nice view. All right, next slide, please. So, as I said, the process of the hand stitching is very mindful. And next slide, please, sorry. So this is some of the research that I was doing, and it is, I've looked at various books, because sometimes we think, oh, mending can be, you want to make it so it's invisible, but actually visible mending actually shows that a lot of love and care has gone into it. And as you see with this this lady that's written this book, Aruna, she says, hand sewing makes me feel very connected to the piece I'm working on, stitch by stitch, with light imperfections showing the evidence of my handiwork. It's a meditative process that is both creative and emotionally satisfying. So it just shows you, you know, that, okay, you know, it doesn't have to be invisible. You know, you can put your love, you know, pour your love into repairing garments. Right, next slide, please. So this came to fruition from a lady that joined us, and she's given a testimonial here, which is very good of her, and I'll read it to you. I came across the repair cafe in Goodwick whilst convalescing from a serious debilitating illness. I took along a kimono that I'd bought several years ago from an antique shop, which was in rather a sad state and required repairs to both the structure and the embroidery. I have since been repairing this with the support and advice from Joe at Repair Cafe. I had never before embarked on such a task, but was supported to give it a go, and now have almost completed the repairs to the embroidery. When this is completed, I will move on to try, with assistance, to repair the seams and the lining. So this is the most important part. She says, I have found the work that I have done so far to be satisfying and enjoyable, and I'm pleased with my success on a practical level, having mastered new skills, and which feels like an achievement. So as well as learning skills, you feel like, oh yeah, you're doing a good job. You are contributing to reducing waste. You are making the most of what you've got. Next slide, please. So, and these are some of the pictures of the work, which is called couching, where you are attaching the thread. There's like a gold embroidery thread there, and it's held to the back of the kimono by little loops of stitching. So she says, in addition, and in some ways more importantly, I've felt a sense of calm and almost meditation as I've worked, which has been very beneficial and emotionally therapeutic. Once completed, I shall certainly seek out another similar project to undertake with the help of Joe and others at the Repair Cafe. So not only hand stitching can be is therapeutic, but also mending on a sewing machine can be fun, and you can make it as funky as you like. So that is next slide, please. So there you go. There are some of the embroidery stitches that are accessible on a machine. Okay, and the final slide, please. So make us last. So don't throw your clothes away. Think twice about it. Could you reutilize it into something else? So there we have it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's see if my machine will come back. Yes, it will. Oh, okay. I've always felt scared of sewing machines since textile O-level, but that actually made me feel very pleasant seeing those beautiful stitches at the end. So there we go then. I think between all of us, it's pretty much covered, isn't it? And we are the converted, but that's definitely fuel for our fires. So over to you all, really, if you would like to ask each other questions, or if there's any further points you'd like to bring up, because there's just a very rich material there, isn't there? Okay, Lizzie, who's stuck on a train, who's who's founder maybe of Incredible Edible. She's sorry she can't be here. She says in the chat, regards her project, I suppose, it's not always easy to change land for public health benefit. The Incredible Edible have certainly had the ups and downs, mostly due to obstacles from the council. She's on her way to the House of Lords at this very moment on a train to launch a campaign with the founder of Incredible Edible about the right for the public to grow food in public spaces. And this is to try and push councils to dedicate land for community food and pollinator projects instead of putting barriers and making it difficult with licenses and leases. Many people give up when it gets too stressful. Wish us luck. Yep, we do. We're all sending you a lot of luck. So there we go. Yeah, in the House of Lords today. Ian, you got your virtual hand up.
Yes, I kind of, because obstacles and challenges, man. Do you know what I mean? It's like, and I kind of think whenever we come together quite a lot to talk about different projects, and like that is the theme, whatever we are trying to do. You know what I mean? There's obstacles and challenges in the way, and I suppose. I'm kind of interested in perhaps what some of the challenges, and they're normally quite similar. And I'm not suggesting that our council's any problem with us, but some of the challenges are there, and I think really these, and I think they are. It's about making what we do mainstream, isn't it? And I think that is happening. I think there has been a movement to bring this front and center, this type of work front and center, I kind of think when we bring it down to people's health, then a license to do a bit of stuff on some land should just fade away. You know what I mean? And I think that is promoting this around health and about something that's all very important to us all. There's something in that to say, look, that we can challenge back and say, actually, this is about public health. Do you know what I mean? And that should trump most things about change of land use. Can we rent this building so we can go and do some sewing and things like this? These should just be they should just be wide open. Those doors should be flung open. How we do that is all of our challenge, and I suppose it's about us coming together in forums like this, and then going away and making sure that we promote this work and say, these good things are going on. I just wanted to kind of comment on that really, and wonder whether anybody else what challenges are people facing.
Yeah, I agree. I agree there, because we struggle with trying to find premises really, and it's difficult, isn't it? It's difficult because we're a charity as well. So
and it shouldn't be, should it? That should be least of your problems. Do you know what I mean? The where you're going to go and do this, how some of the challenges is people having the energy to come and make these things happen. And like if it's access to a bit of space to do this, it's a ridiculous block, isn't it? That for me. So how do we get around that? And it's about, for me, for Welcome to Our Woods, it's about the community owning these assets in some ways. These spaces need to be owned by community groups and need to be managed locally, because as I sort of said earlier, that in our experience, the community can balance all of these books and balance all of these challenges very quickly, especially if you're thinking about climate change and you consider your own grandchildren or your children, you can put that into context very quickly and give the green light to the decisions. But when we're talking about people in faraway lands, then actually it looks a lot more complicated than it actually is. And I think it's the same problem. Can you get access to that is the same. Somehow we need to join all of this stuff up, and we need to work together in communities to kind of facilitate all of these things to happen. And all of these things have to happen in all of our communities, in some ways. So yeah, interesting that we all face the same problems, what I mean?
No, you carry on, Jay.
I'm involved in a community garden as well, and a lot of it is just voluntary. We've adopted an area and just by a local pathway, and we've planted. There's several of us, but I used it as part of my project when I couldn't get into uni last year. So I had like a wishing tree of what do you wish for, and inviting people to write their wishes on labels provided. And it's sort of grown from there as well. People left artifacts and that, but that is community response. But it's like sometimes, you know, I mean, at the moment we've got Japanese knotweed there, which is, we've asked the council, but when they will go and do it to clear it, you know, it's another thing. It's but the community work of actually getting people together has been beneficial for mental, you know, for mental anxiety as well. It's been brilliant.
I mean, when you look at the so down in Jay's bit, I think that's publicly owned land, but they've just kind of adopted it, that this garden, this wishing tree and everything, and it's there's a little bit about it on one of these really nice films, isn't there? I can't remember which film, but then when you look at your future forest vision and the Welcome to Our Woods stuff, it does look like it just all happened without resistance. And then we know that Lizzie's project up there on the council Canol van Hamven land there was quite a resistance from the council. So has anyone actually found any sort of like really sweet ways to move through these things? Because I think back my 30 years of doing odd things is that I've tended just to try and find the path of least resistance. So if there's a massive block, I've just kind of like gone into the old psychic library and tried to find a less resistant path. There you go. So Lizzie's saying, yeah, work with the schools, and then there's an open door then. Yeah.
Yeah, I recognise exactly what you're saying there, Jasmine. So what Callum McIntosh was one of the founding directors of Welcome Towards, and he was an old head that kind of helped me think about this. And he often used to say, if we're starting to get stuck, open up another front. Open up another front. Don't get bogged down in this, Ian. Do you know what I mean? He used to say, don't get bogged down in that argument. Open something else up. This is such a wide subject that we can go and work. We can work on a slightly different subject matter. Do you know what I mean? And so where we found these challenges, it wasn't without resistance. It was about, but what the sweet spot to this, which is unfortunate, is relationship based. It's basically, if you've got a really good relationship with a Natural Resource Wales officer, that person will go out of their way to help make things happen for you. Do you know what I mean? And because there's a trust and a mutual agenda there then. And I think that is such a shame that it comes down to personal relationships where we can't go on like this. It can't be that Welcome to Our Woods might get permission, but someone who's got a different officer just over the road can't get the similar permissions. And we need this to happen across Wales. We need all of these things so we've got to find ways of just facilitating these things easily. I don't think we can look outside. I don't think we should look outside. I think we need to bring agency to our villages and our towns. We need agency here, and we need access to our own assets. So we don't have to ask permission, because asking permissions, a cap in hand approach is not helpful for communities either. And just having control yourself. You can make things happen, whether or not it's the big things, but you can make little things happen. But unfortunately, our experience is it's relationship based. That's how things change, and it doesn't help. It doesn't help the system in that way.
It might, I can see your point around it's not systemic and not embedded in all the different bodies, but it's also probably very human, isn't it? Like that, if we get on, we get on. And talking of whom I get on, Philip, you've got your hand up.
Well, it's just really sort of building on what has just been said. I think that the big problems that we face in the world are actually all to do with big. The real big. It's the big organisations, the big governments that are making the wrong big decisions and priorities and things, and all that will have to change. It's got to change at some point, but a lot of the real tangible change that has impacts on individuals and communities is at that grassroots level, at that community level. And that is where the energy probably is worth being placed on building those relationships and pushing the doors for, like Lizzie mentioned, schools. I think where there are community councils, that offers a real opportunity. The resources available are low, but a lot of community councils do have a bit of money, and they do have some land or buildings that they own. And I think that's where you can begin to make inroads, and then move up a little bit to local authorities and other public bodies that are, we heard earlier, you know, Public Health Wales, and, you know, the health boards are beginning to get switched on to all of this and beginning to give space and resources. So, you know, I think it is very much, I agree with the very recent comments, that it is about local people doing it for themselves and engaging with people at a very local level, you know, at a ward level, at a community or village level. You know, that's where an awful lot of traction can happen. And then it can spin off, can't it? It can build up and influence the next village. Well, if they can do it, we can do it in our village. So, and it starts building up and changing the world from that perspective.
Thank you. I'm just wondering about any of the people I can't see, if you'd like a special opportunity to speak, the ones without without pictures. Please feel free to unmute and say something if you'd like to reflect on the presentations or got something that you're thinking about. What about the rest?
Here's
Maureen.
Sorry.
That's all right. Well, let's have Maureen then Derek.
Yeah. Okay.
Hi. Thanks. I'm not actually in Wales, but I find it really, really interesting, all the work that you're doing. And I've particularly that where I live, I have much bigger problems with my council than any of you people seem to have. There seems to be a quicker sea change down there, which is really encouraging, frustrating for me in a little way, but really, really encouraging. Because where I live, it's like a block wall everywhere you go. It doesn't matter whether you use the words, you know, health and climate change and climate emergency and emergence and cultural emergence. You know, there just seems to be, in this area where I am, it's a completely unconscious place where I live. So I really, really wish you all the best, and I wish I could move down to Wales. And I'm really, really encouraged by some of the things that you're doing there. It's fantastic. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Well, we don't know where you are, but we do hope that you can use Ian's advice, like, what was it, change fronts?
Yeah, I'm in Bradford in West Yorkshire. I've been trying to get land for a community garden up here for 3 years now, in every direction I possibly can, and everywhere I go, the door is shut. So yeah, I started on a small level.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone's got any advice, but I think one thing I've heard is you make a very nice little poster and you put it in all the newspapers, and you ask, or you build up, or you actually use your personality to build up a positive relationship with someone who owns land, and then get them to lend you 1/4 of an acre for 1 year.
It's interesting you say that, because I've identified land that is owned by a faceless organization that I can get to through company's house. I know who it is, but trying to get in touch with anybody. And it's a massive piece of land. It would be so beneficial for the community. So that's one of the other directions I tried to go as well.
Partly was in when you said faceless organization, you go to make friends with someone.
Yeah,
yeah. Okay, you look like you've got a beautiful greenhouse behind you, but that's sort of the people I know around here that have sort of gone against the odds. They seem to have made an actual decent friendship with someone, be it, you know, someone from the opposite social world, and they've managed something. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not an encyclopedia.
What about
Maureen.
land in
We're all going to
parks?
send you best luck. Derek?
I was just saying to the lady there, what about land in parks? Has she tried that?
Well, that's a good point. Yeah, do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, there isn't a lot of park area where I live. The thing is, there are things going on outside of my community, but I'm really, really trying to do something on my doorstep. You know, you can travel to things everywhere where I live, but nothing's happening on my doorstep, and that's where I feel it's really important. So I've started with teaching neighbours to grow food. So that's where I ended up, and I'm hoping to try and spread out from that point.
It's a good start.
Thank you.
Yeah, there we go. It does sound like a good start. Thanks, Derek.
The point I was going to make was utilization of buildings or rooms or whatever to do all the things, all the really good things that people are talking about. You've got church halls and churches and other properties that are maybe shops that have shut down in main streets and things like that. I like that idea of mending clothes. That's a really good idea, where people, the older people, possibly could share their skills with younger people, and because the throwaway society that we live in is ridiculous, really, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a nice point there about as well the intergenerational thing, isn't it? Like, you know, all of I'm 48, but my mother's generation, they all knew how to sew and dressmake and do wonderful things, but I didn't get passed on that. And so there's, although it has become very popular now with the young people, it's you know, compared to how it was, we still don't really know, do we? There's a skills deficit for these type of things. So luckily we have the likes of Joe in our midst. I'm wondering, oh, sorry, were you going to say more, Derek?
No, it's all right. That's okay. That's the point I wanted to make.
Like you said, with the churches as well, that's a good place to start, isn't it? I would
well, there are lots of places in churches which are either vestries or church halls, which are very, have got very low usage, and could be, they could be used for all sorts of different things. The only problem is that you can't leave stuff there. If you were doing a sewing thing and you had machines and all that, I suppose but that's not an insurmountable problem, I wouldn't think.
No, that's a really good point, isn't it? Because they're, like you say, they're quite empty nowadays, and so might be the perfect. You like to think in terms of inputs and outputs, you know, matching up needs and needs.
Well, I was actually in a church in the Mumbles yesterday that has moved upstairs. They built up on what was a balcony, a new church, if you like, and underneath is a shop, which could equally be lots of other things. In fact, there is another church in Swansea that does lots and lots of different activities in the ground floor, and the church itself is then upstairs. It was moved upstairs. I don't know all the how it was done or whatever, how much it cost, but lots of big buildings like that, particularly some of the old chapels, which have got a balcony upstairs and shouldn't be too difficult to put an additional floor, although it costs a lot of money, of course.
Well, it's a good point, isn't it? And of course, chapels were the centre of everything, weren't they, for so long?
Yeah. And of course, you're also up against the bureaucracy of churches as well, which can be a little bit fraught.
Okay, we'll pray if that's not an important thing to say.
Yeah, so, that's true. Yeah.
I noticed Clive's put his camera on, and also Matt has unmuted. So should we just hear from Clive briefly or quickly or longly, if you like, because you haven't had a chance to speak, and then see why Matt's unmuted.
Yeah, thank you. This has been mostly an opportunity. Where I'm from with regard to the initiative that's been launched, Focus Well, is it's a brand new setup, and so although I mean, through being an OPD myself, One Planet Development myself, obviously heavily engaged with regard to well-being, but also obviously with regard to climate change. This grouping, or this initiative, I should say, as I said, is brand new. So I'm here basically to learn, and as an opportunity to sort of grow, understand, get some feelers, get some contacts. So hence, not so much of the input, because I want to absorb rather than actually put in. Just a couple of things on that with regard to the areas that I think this initiative will be focusing on a lot, and that where we need to learn an awful lot. And what the talks have been excellent, and the information and the knowledge that can be gained from that it has been hugely inspirational with regard to that whole learning curve. Is the two aspects with regard to, and this was touched on with regard to the carer feedback, with regard to privilege, and the fact that I think we're finding that a lot, particularly around here in Cardigan, the people who are engaged have essentially got a very privileged position to be in, or are in order to be able to engage. Lots of the people who are not engaging are those who, as identified, are simply struggling on a day-to-day basis just to get through their lives, just to do things in their lives. And although they're aware, obviously, of climate change, the need to be focusing on well-being, it's very difficult for them to detach themselves almost sometimes, to be able to then get into that process when they're 9 to 5, they're you know, the 24/7 day lives are so crammed, packed with kids, work, everything, that they just don't feel that they have the spare capacity to be able to get involved in these things, or do anything, or learn, even just to learn. And so that's an area that we're very keen to learn more about, take on some of these understandings, so that we can then use that as a means of sort of channeling into that and breaking down some of these barriers that are stopping people from that kind of engagement. And yeah.
One thing I was wondering about, because when I've been writing and thinking and all about these things, is that, you know, like with the uptick in groups and social prescribings and all these things that are suddenly happening, that seems to be quite a new increase, so that now you are getting people who previously had, say, no financial resources or were depressed or whatever, and they're suddenly being given spaces on really quite interesting, nourishing programs. You know, there's quite a proliferation of them. I just also wondered whether anyone else has seen evidence of that, like the young carers or these other groups, which, like you say, if you're like working all the time, or you've got huge problems on your plate, you're not really going to be particularly have the brainwave space to go and access these services and these wonderful like outdoor programs and everything. I mean, maybe like the stuff that's happening, the walk with friends and things up at Ian's, or I don't know, I wondered, or is there something where people like young carers are being given some relief that dovetails with these well-being and environmental things? Because I see them around, or I hear of them, like various services, like the Wallage, you know, the homeless charity, people that have had tenancy issues. And of course, because of what they've been under, a lot of them have huge social and psychological challenges on their plate. But the Wallage seems to offer amazing stuff nationally. And then when I asked a support worker, she said, well, yeah, it's quite easy to get referred into those programs. I know still the client would have to be open to it, but that's one thing I'd heard about recently, and they're getting allotments and everything. Maya, were you going to say something there?
Just a couple of things. Just the yes, I was, you know, involved in support working with homeless and people with addiction issues the last 3 years, and there's just no space from what I saw within the support work role, because you're so enmeshed in getting the basics in terms of there are no homes, there are no private agency lets. So, you know, but I'd love to know that's happening more with young carers. I think funding is still an issue, which is ridiculous. But I'm in touch with the young carers organisations here in Denbighshire, and they were trying to lease a bit of land to actually develop all of this, and they've had the same problems that people have mentioned here. So, but I don't want to dampen what you're saying, Jasmine, because I completely get what you're saying. You know, that there has to be ways of doing this, and hopefully it will start happening more. But we do need to include them, as Clive was saying so eloquently. Really, I do worry about this, that you know, I'm hearing about people. I was doing a climate action chat not so long ago, and it was all the people who've got the means, who've done the panels, who are looking into the air source pumps. So, you know, it's but that's why Welcome to Our Woods is so inspiring, because, you know, but we've just got to keep positive and be inspired and keep on believing and keep on doing, haven't we, really?
I think so. Teresa?
Oh, I'm unmuted. Right. Yeah, something about the incredible edible groups. We always, I mean, even if people can't actually come and help to do anything, we always welcome people to come and chat to us, to find out information. And of course, the food's there for free for them as well. This is what we're doing it. I mean, you know, we're just planting so that people in the community can come and help themselves, herbs, vegetables, fruit. And we always love to chat to people. During lockdown, we're very close to a place called Haverdey Guest, where some of the older people would sometimes just look out through their windows and sometimes come walking along the edible corridor and just wanted to talk to us about, you know, how they used to own gardens. Obviously now they're in more of a care home situation. So just doing things like that slowly opens up a community, you know, an area for talking and for sharing. And I think that's important as well. So people don't always have to feel that they have to join a group, that they should be allowed to just come and enjoy the smells, the taste, the colours, and just talk to us.
Fair comment. Yeah, Ian?
Jasmine, yeah, no, to go back to Maureen's point, I kind of wanted to mention it's a bit different in England, because in Wales we've got the Future Generations Act, and, you know, the public bodies are obliged to respect future generations, and the things that we do today need to respect that the things need to be available for the future. So in Wales we've got this legislation that has allowed us to do this. In England that's going forward as well, isn't it? The Lord Bird is taking that forward. He's been working with Sophie Howe, our Future Generation Commissioner, and that's something that I think Maureen will watch out for, and perhaps be up to date with that legislation, because it's been helpful for us. The issue with benefits in Wales is that we've got these registered that housing associations may be an interesting approach. You might be able to approach housing associations. They have excess land. They quite often they bank land that they're going to build on in 10 years time, and if you can talk them into giving you a license that doesn't give you any big tenure to the land, and say it's a license for 5 years, you're not going to build on it for, you've got plans maybe in 10 years time, maybe this is a way of getting access to land very quickly. Now, we've had a great experience of working with Rhondda Housing, RHA Wales on this. So housing associations are really beneficial in Wales. They're registered social landlords, so they come underneath the Future Generations Act. They've got an obligation around that legislation, so that's a slightly different thing. So yeah, I would just give a bit of advice on that, really, and say maybe an approach on housing associations. The other bit is kind of just keeps on coming back to me here, and you mentioned permaculture and Bill Molson, and his statement about all the world's problems can be solved in a garden. And as Welcome to Our Woods has been, and my experience of Welcome to Our Woods, that is absolutely true. You know, all of these things that we're talking about, you know, the resources we need to live, clothes, food, energy, all come from, you know, from nature and from gardens, and that's a really important thing to kind of bear in mind. And the last point is about money, and about that we're often put into competition with each other to apply for the same funds, and that there's some issue with that, because even at a local level we get into competition, and we, you know, Welcome to Our Woods has tried to avoid that, but like it does happen, you end up in competition with other groups applying for the same money, try and effectively have the same outcome. And it's about partnership and working together, and the funders need to be supportive of that as well, of those type of approaches. So there's something about the money that we get as well.
Thanks. Yeah, that housing associations, yeah, banking land, that's a good one, isn't it? It's a nice idea to have that you'd have the garden in perpetuity, but actually realistically, why not have it for a few years? You never know what's going to happen, do we? World might end, right? So lovely. Okay, well look, we thought this would only go on to 11:30. We thought everyone would have had their fill, but here we are still nattering away. Lizzie's posted her website there, which I think was up a couple of times now, on a Facebook page if their progress in Porthmadog. Now we can still carry on talking, and also Matt and I did have a short 4-minute film from the Coed Cliog. They're doing a massive programme of wellbeing outdoor activities across the country. I don't know, how are people feeling? Do you want to say more? Do you want to go and enjoy the sunshine, or do you want to watch the film? What's your thoughts?
Shall we watch? Let's watch the film. I'm happy to watch the film.
Yeah, and me.
Okay, well, I'll just say something. When we asked permission, Coed Cliog did ask me to mention, so they've received a £2 million funding to do outdoor wellbeing activities across Wales. So there should be one in every county. You can self-refer. You don't have to go for a GP or an organisation. So if you feel you would benefit from it, you can somehow get contact with them, or you could tell anyone you know who would be needing something like this. But they also asked me to mention that the new certificate for group leaders for wellbeing in nature is now being piloted across the country. And so this is for people that are already leading groups but would like more confidence in how to do this in the outdoors. And I have also been a trainer on one of the pilots. So at the moment it's going out in Pembrokeshire, Denbighshire and the Gower. So that's out there. And so, yeah, so this is one of Coed Cliog's many films about wellbeing and outdoors. And in particular, it's made by Mike Erskine, who's a Renew Wales character. So, and made the film for the Future Forest Vision for Ian's lot as well. Brilliant little films. So it's only 4 minutes long. And then I think maybe we'll call it a day. And looks like we've got plenty of ways to keep in contact. All the links are posted. And I believe that Matt will be emailing out all the slides as requested. So here we go. We even practiced yesterday with how to play these things on YouTube. We're dab hands now. No audio for me yet, Matt.
But after I've done this, I go home and I'm just nothing but positive. I feel so much better after I've done these sessions. My mental health draws from my past, but I never really understood it until I finally managed to get the courage of actually saying I have depression and issues when I was 21. And it is literally only now that I'm actually getting better. Like, every day is a challenge, don't get me wrong. It always wants to bring me down, but at the same time, my mum and dad have always said, like, getting to where you even are now, so proud of you, because you're finally becoming you again.
I feel that reliably over the 25 years I've been dealing with mental illness, the things that I've found time and time again that will improve my mental well-being are nature, community, physical activity, creativity, and this incorporates all of those. And it gives me something to look forward to as well. So that, you know, no matter how bad it is, I always know if I could just make it till Tuesday or take off on my woodland section, I'll be amongst friends and be doing something I enjoy, learning something new as well, which is great.
You're in this beautiful woods here, you know, and the leaves and the different trees, and once you're here, you forget all your troubles. I got diagnosed with Asperger's and ADHD a few years back, and you know, I'm in my 40s now. I've sort of struggled over the years, but I find that sort of coming here does give me a really good sort of piece of confidence. If I could be here every day, I really would.
Well, it's made me feel better myself. I was quite lonely, quite isolated, and I was, involved in a domestic violence relationship, so I needed something to bring me out of myself, really. And you know, there's other people in the group that have got different issues, and you know, sometimes you can help them, sometimes they can help you.
I came to the group because I suffer with mental health myself, where I have my down days and just live in bed, and I just didn't want to know, shut the world away. I thought the world was against me, and I came to this group hoping to get out and build my confidence, and which it has a massive impact. I'm not alone anymore, and I feel wanted and stuff, if that makes sense.
Mae gennym ni amryw o oedolion efo autism, Asperger's, visually impaired, pobl mewn cadeiriau olwyn, yn dŵad bob dydd Gwener I amryw o lefydd ar Ynys Môn.
There's an aspect of challenging behaviour as part of his autism, but we never see that on a Friday. His mood's great for the rest of the day. Generally, we walk on our own and get a bit of space, switch off, because he's got a lot of things going in his own head. It's so inspiring to see Owen and others that come here, that in the way that it opens them up and makes them smile.
There you go. I thought I'd watched it enough times, but I actually felt a little bit emotional that time. So thank you. Anyone would like to have a final word or reflection before we see if it's still sunny?
You've given us quite a lot of food for thought.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Derek, for your inputs. They were very much appreciated, everything you said, and maybe we'll meet again.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. It was very interesting, all of it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, presenters, for all that effort you've gone to as well. And for Matt, of course, always supportive and technical. Yeah. Good. Well, okay, let's continue this conversation then in our work, and good luck to everybody with what you're doing. And we can know that we're all out there doing little things, can't we? So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Matt. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.